Welcome back to Primary Source China Investment. As Evergrande finds out its fate on Monday, Peng Guo and I thought it'd be a good time to talk about defaults for onshore and offshore entities on show V5. So defaults happen, no doubt, but what happens after defaults might be more important. When bond investors don't get their return, their interest payment, they become anxious about recovery, default, procedure, and how much they'll get back in a liquidation process and what percent of their initial investment they might get back. So this past week, S&P issued a fantastic report on China bonds, both on and offshore. Remember, onshore bonds are generally priced in renminbi and offshore bonds are priced in US dollar. And there's no surprise that there are significant differences that we're going to get into. The first being that onshore debt is generally senior to offshore debt. So we're going to look at what happens in default. And of course, the property sector weighs heavily on the discussion. So there's a lot to unpack here, and let's start at the top. There are two periods in question, 2016 to 2019, and then 2020 to 2023 year to date. The first thing we notice is that defaults soared both offshore and onshore for the real estate issuers, but offshore really took the brunt of this. In the earlier 3-year period, only 5 bonds defaulted. In the most recent 3 years, 288 defaulted. Similarly, the number of onshore defaults went from 15 to 233. So, Peng Guo, I don't think there's any surprise that the property sector saw massive amounts of defaults in the last 3 years. But is there any systematic thing that happened, or is there anything that policy change that caused a lot of these defaults?
I think people talk about the root cause of the real estate. So entire the real estate business model is unsustainable. A little bit like the Hong Kong model. They initially talk about the Singapore model and Hong Kong model, but finally they choose the bad Hong Kong model and cause today's problem. And the country takes the policy, try to control about it. But plus the COVID-19 impact, that's really a lot of things get changed and hurt. So it's more like the internal problem plus the outside impact. So it's really make this industry get crashed. Also, that is the core industry of the China economy. I think right now China still suffer the consequence.
Yeah, this could also be just the end of a 20-year cycle, which was overinvestment and a lot of speculation. And we can see that in the second point we want to bring up, which is the amount of property default really distinguished themselves. You know, you see on the offshore market, 87% of all defaults was real estate related. And that's in the 2020 to 2023 period versus the 2015 to 2019 period where it was like 13%. Similarly, on the onshore market, more than half of the total defaults were in the real estate sector, whereas in the previous period, it was single digits, like 6%. So bonds are defaulting, but how much are investors losing? This is the real question, right? So
yeah.
So bonds are defaulting, but how much are investors losing? This is the big question, right? So offshore, for the property cases, if you go to court, you're getting about 2.8% of your face value of your bond, which is literally pennies on the dollar. If you have a negotiated settlement, you're getting about 35.6%. So that's significantly better when you go to a negotiated settlement. Contrast that to non-real estate, where you're getting about 17.6% in a court settlement and about 46.8%. So forget about all the numbers, Peng Guo, right? The message here is negotiate a settlement, don't go to court on the offshore case.
I think according to Chinese to doing the business in this big situation, obviously negotiation is the first step. And go to the court, that will be increase a lot of the work as well as the responsibility. Because like the Evergrande, they have a lot of the economical crimes in the borrowing money and process. So some of the lender even like the U.S. It's not just to say the U.S. Bondholder. It's most likely they transfer China's money into their own, put in the U.S. Trustees, and they'll hold the name. So that's if you see the details, it's really like the criminal organizations. So I don't know if that happens in the United States, but it looks like it could. Every time it's big case get blow out, you will see a lot of the crimes, and that's the case. So that is very hard. I would be interested to see what's the recovery rate.
Yeah, the recovery rate onshore is similar, bad. Real estate assets about 8.3% in court, about 32.5% out of court. And the conventional wisdom used to be, well, real estate, you at least have an asset and somebody will take it over and it'll get worked out. This actually throws a lot of cold water on that in so much as recovery rates are very, very low for real estate and much better in non-real estate related assets. And another slide that the S&P report had was the time to recovery. So the time to recovery is pretty quick if you negotiate. That's sort of 3 months. This is offshore, about 3 months offshore if you negotiate. If you go to court, it probably takes a year, takes a little bit longer. And then onshore, things take much longer in general. Things can drag on for years. You see this in the chart. Even if it's, in court is obviously longer. Out of court, it's settled in usually about 2 years, 2 to 3 years. On the real estate sector, it's quicker than other sectors. So the short answer here is when you go into default, best to negotiate. And the final piece of the puzzle is the default rate. Default rates actually spiked in 2022. It was you could see it was at a record, and the notional value was about 10% of all bonds were defaulting. That's a massive number. And you can see, Peng Guo, I think you have a point here about POEs and SOEs. One is private, one is state-owned. And you can see...
that is a too big a part. It's more like the state-owned company get a lower percentage in the default
Absolutely.
rate.
Yeah, you can see that on the chart on the left that we have up.
People always complain the country control the state company is unfair, but they really do the business and face the market risk. A state-owned company is much better than the private company, and the entire management and regulation compliance that all at least better than the private company.
Absolutely. So you're looking at default rates spiking over 10% in 2022, but generally speaking, they were very low. 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20 were all around 2%. If you contrast that to US, what they call speculative grade, you're looking at default rates that are kind of similar to speculative grade, which is junk. Let's not use polite terminology here. Speculative grade is junk in the US, which is below BBB. So you're looking at very risky bonds here. So to put this in a risk reward framework, China's bonds currently yield at lower rates, have default rates that are similar to junk, and recovery rates that are half. So that's the final point on the investment side, because recovery rates in the US tend to be much, much, much higher.
Yeah, that's true. And always don't lend the money in Asia peak time.
Yeah.
Always that is cause a lot of the problem.
Yeah, the bankruptcy procedure, onshore and offshore is still not, it's not quick, it's not easy. And, like we've seen with this data, you get less money if you go to court. So try to negotiate a settlement. That's Evergrande's going to find out on Monday. And then the final point is, choose your metaphor here. The pig isn't through the python yet, because despite more than 125 billion in US dollar property bonds currently in default in Hong Kong, another 60 billion is due in the next 6 months. So while we've seen default rates maybe peak, there is a big chunk of bonds maturing in the next 6 months. So we're going to leave it there for show V5. Thanks for tuning in. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.